if you look at the early sort of key political appointments by Obama, you notice that, in fact, among his top appointees, there isn't really a terribly deep strain of Asianist identity or experience among hardly any of them. Hillary Clinton, who is the Secretary of State, doesn't, she's well-traveled and is obviously the wife of a former president and has a sense of the world, but doesn't have I wouldn't say a professional background in East Asian affairs or in Japan. And Obama, no one knows what Obama thinks of East Asia or of Japan. And you could sort of go around the horn and look at the other top appointees, and I think for many, if not most of them, you could say much the same thing. So as I've thought about that, and I've talked with my Japanese friends, and I've read the Japanese press coverage that's sort of obsessed about this question, whether the relationship, what does this mean for us? I've sort of come to the conclusion that it's the wrong question, and that it is even, in fact, I would argue, a somewhat unhealthy question, that Japan has allowed itself to, over a long period, to sort of get into a rut of the best way to say this, I guess, would be to sort of, it's attentism, waiting to see what's going to happen on the part of its major alliance partner, the United States, and instead of assessing its own foreign policy, assessing its own needs, its own priorities, and behaving in a more proactive fashion. And I think this current transition that we've just been through is really the apotheosis of this phenomenon in terms of, I've never quite seen it for some of the, in part because of the factors of this unknown Obama factor that I've already spoken about. I think, I'm not so, others may speak of the personnel question, so who's going to be deciding Japan-U.S. ties, questions critical to Japan-U.S. ties, and I'm certainly not an expert in sort of reading those tea leaves. I know that I would expect James Steinberg to be a very important player. Kurt Campbell I would expect to be, he's somebody who has a very solid grounding in alliance issues and knows the region very well, and I think is widely respected, and I think you can expect a soundness and a degree of expertise at that level of the administration that should serve as a sort of reassurance to partners in Japan and elsewhere. But I think this attentism that I've described leads to, and this, if you've read the Japanese press recently, this sort of open sense of hand-wringing and anxiety about, so who are the players going to be and what does it mean for us, and is there going to be another Japan passing, and are they going to give us our due, and that sort of thing, I think speaks of a bigger problem in the relationship, a problem of a Japan that, as I've said already, has not quite grown into, in alliance terms, a stature or a status of proper assertion. And I like to think of it as this pattern of sort of waiting to see what Washington's going to decide, sort of wringing one's hands before you know what they're going to decide, kind of complaining after they've decided, but never really effectively asserting one's own interests, or even better than simply asserting one's own interests, elaborating and enunciating a proper agenda for oneself. I liken it to almost to a romantic relationship, and I hope you'll pardon my crude imagery here, but I was trying to work this out over lunch, and the best I could come up with was, maybe you had an ex of one kind or another, and you're on civil terms still, but one party sees the other party as essentially trying to avoid, whether this is the case or not, avoid the other party. And so you agree to lunch, and the aggrieved party is looking very much aggrieved and saying, why don't I see you anymore? Why can't I ever find you? Where are you these days? And this is what the sort of obsession about American attention toward China, what sort of where Japan will fit into the pecking order, this sort of notional pecking order will be, and I think it's not just debilitating for Japan because it sort of takes energy away from the proper elaboration of an agenda, but it also is irritating for the American Party, that where the Americans feel like they are basically salving the wounded ego of what should be a mature person, or in this case, a mature nation. And I don't mean to say this in insulting terms to Japan or to Japanese people, that certainly they're not mature, but there's something about the relationship that strikes me as lacking in maturity.